Joining us now is a 5-time first-team All-Pro, 7-time Pro Bowler, who also just happens to be, wait for it, let me get this right, the 226th overall selection of the 1985 draft. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Tasker on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Steve?
I'm doing great, Rich. Thank you for the awesome introduction. That's great.
226th overall pick, 9th round draft choice in 1985 of the Houston Oilers. Right, Steve?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. I walked into that locker room had Mike Munchak,
Yep.
Bruce Matthews, and Warren Moon in it.
And eventually, Jerry Glanville is your head coach, Steve?
Yeah, after my rookie year, he was my second year's starting head coach. It was I love Jerry. Jerry was a great guy, a good friend of mine. In fact,
yes,
he coached my son in the Canadian Football League back in 2018-19.
Look at this.
He was the defensive coordinator for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and I got a chance to go up and say hi to him. And him and June Jones were working up. It was awesome.
So is that where you met Elvis then? You met Elvis in Canada?
No, I have yet to meet Elvis.
Okay.
But I am on the list.
Okay, just want to make sure. Go to Will Call, check that one out. Yeah. So give me your favorite Glanville story. Hit me with that, Steve.
He used to tell. I thought it was cool because I was a rookie and I was a scared to death rookie. I didn't know anything, right? And he's a head coach. It was just my start of my second year, and Jerry was the new head coach, and he had his thing going on. And he goes, "Hey, Minnie," he called me Minnie, and he said, "Hey, Minnie, I want you to stand right next to me on the sidelines. You got to be right next to me the whole game." I was like, "Okay," and I was like, "Wow, this is awesome, right?" And he's gonna, keep me there, and because I was doing some stuff, kick returning, playing a little wide out, so I thought I was utility guy, and he wanted me handy, right? So we're there, and after a game or so. 2 games, he goes, "Yeah, don't forget you got to stand by." I go, "What are you going to do?" I go, "You didn't do this." He goes, "Well, I just want you to stand by me because people think football players are tall. And so when they see you standing next to me, they're going to think I'm 6'1". Sorry. I'm like, "Okay, Jer."
Oh, my. And Marv Levy said the same thing to you when you got to Buffalo? Is that what happened, Steve?
Yeah, no, that was not Marv's style. Yeah.
Different
Marv's
story?
Different. Yeah, different vibe.
I bet so, man. And so when did you first realize things were beginning to cook there in Western New York?
I think when we at the end of we went 12-4 in '88,
right?
And it felt a little bit like we caught lightning in a bottle. Certainly we had some talent. We had a bunch of Hall of Famers on the crew, but we were kind of missing some ingredients maybe, and it was hard for a guy like me to tell. At the end of 1989, our team was known as the Bickering Bills in that season. We had some guys like Jim and Bruce and Thurman, Cornelius Bennett, a bunch of guys, and we had a bunch of talent, but we didn't have any chemistry, didn't have any culture, didn't have any, like that. And they were bickering, man. They didn't like each other. They were, it was my least favorite season in my entire career.
No kidding.
And then at the end of that season, Jim Kelly, bless his heart, just reached out and said, "Listen, talk to Bruce, Cornelius Bennett, Thurman, Kent Hull, Daryl Talley, some key guys."
Yeah.
And he said, "Dudes, we're in this together. So when we get home tonight after this game, why don't you come over to the house and hang out a little bit, and we'll start hanging." So when those guys started breaking down the walls of their personal lives and started being friends, because they were great players.
Yeah.
And they started to be friends, and that changed the entire vibe of our team. And those last 3 games of '89, we lost in the wild card round in Cleveland in one of the great games ever, when Bernie and Ronnie Harmon dropped a pass late in the game. Clay Matthews picked Jim off at the very end to seal it. It was a fantastic game. And after that season, we really felt like we turned the corner. Marv made some very shrewd releases and signings in that offseason, and we came back and went to 4 straight Super Bowls from that point on. Yeah. At the end of '89, we went through some really hard growing pains and came out of it right at the end of that season pretty good. And it carried over, and that team became what it was.
I mean, I'll ask Jim next time he comes on, but can you add any context to what caused Jim to just say, you know what, heck, I'm just going to call everybody up, invite them over?
You could feel the tension. You could feel the tension in the locker room. And for whatever, and Jim was one of 5 sons. So he knew what it was to be in a group, and have strife, when you fight with your brothers, that kind of thing. And he just dropped his guard and said, listen, there's no reason for us to be a team like this. And those other guys were all about it. Bruce, Cornelius, Ken Hull, Daryl Talley, they were all about it. And they kind of put their arms around. Jim came over. They, downed a couple bottles of wine, and then it happened. Then it started happening every week. They got together at Jim's every week, and then it turned into this post game thing that really took on this mythic status. Jim, he was single back then. He had this huge house over in Orchard Park, and after every home game, he said he invited the entire team to his house.
Wow!
And he'd feed them. He had a bar, and he had this bar in the bottom of his house. I mean, a real bar, like with a dance floor and a pool table and the whole thing. And so everybody showed up at his house, and then you'd have, like, my mom and dad would come in, or my brothers would come in, or all my family members or college buddies would come in. I said, Jim, I can't get to your house tonight. I got these people in. And Jim would say, hey, bring them over with you. It was more, he said, bring them with you. So Jim had this get together in his basement after home games that was everybody. My mom and dad were there. They're like, my dad was a pastor. So he had those guys in, and, so my mom and dad came over. I mean, everybody was over there, and it became this mythical kind of gathering, and our team became much closer because of it. And we started playing for each other and even each other's families that we knew. We started playing for something bigger than ourselves, and it carried us through 4 pretty good years.
Love it. And one of our favorite Jim Kelly stories was at the Hall of Fame years and years ago. And the bartending staff in the hotel where all the Hall of Famers were staying, they needed help. Like there were many more patrons than folks behind the bar, and Jim decided, I'm just going to start helping this staff, and he hopped behind the bar and started serving everyone. And so this tracks is basically what I'm saying, Steve.
Well, I'll say this, that Jim cut a wide swath, and this is a true story. When Jim went in the Hall of Fame, he was a first ballot guy.
Oh, yes.
And the Hall of Fame said, how many people do we need to accommodate for your group? How many friends are you bringing with you? And he said 37 busloads. And they said 37 people. He goes, no. 37 busloads of people. And if you remember, that's the first year where they had to move the Hall of Fame induction ceremonies from the steps of the Hall of Fame into the stadium. That was the first time they did. And Boomer started, Chris Berman started hosting it. It became this big event.
Yep.
And they had to open it up because the entire region of Western New York showed up at Jim's induction, and they just couldn't accommodate all those people. And now it's a big deal, and they do it every year like that. But Jim was the guy who forced them to do that.
Yes, the story that I was told by the Hall of Fame about this, Steve, this is the first time I've heard 37 busloads. That's a first for me. But the story that people say is you could draw a line from Western New York through his hometown of Pittsburgh all the way down to Ohio, and it was just a massive migration of Jim Kelly lovers that needed to be accommodated within a larger space than the front steps of the Hall of Fame and I-77. You just couldn't fit everybody, and that's why that's why Jim Kelly is the reason why there is a ceremony every year in the stadium, and also that there is a personal bar for the Hall of Famers. Jim created that one too. Like he's got the legend left, right, up and down. I got Steve.
I've met a couple hundred people who bartended at his house at our party. So,
Steve Tasker here on the Rich Eisen Show. Let's talk about the here and now with the Buffalo Bills, and starting with the most recent preseason game. Very simple question: what was that? Steve.
Yeah, it was a stinker. That was a stinker
So
in
what
Chicago.
do you think? What do you think?
Yeah, certainly that I've seen that before. I mean, I was a part of it. It was all too familiar to me. We used to go 0-4 under Marv Levy before we'd go to the Super Bowl in the preseason.
Okay.
But that was a stinker, and I think it shocked a couple of. It's not that they were bummed about losing the game, but they just didn't feel like they were competitive. I think there's a lot of things in it. The road trip, the couple of days in flopping in a hotel with nothing to do. They showed up flat. They didn't game plan, and I think I don't know anything about the Bears and what they, but I get the feeling the Bears wanted to look good in that game, so they game plan, played their ones. I think they gave Caleb Williams a few extra things to work with offensively. They let him air out a little bit. And it's a testament to how thin the margins are. You got a team that won 5 games. I think Chicago won 5 games last year, and the Bills are in the conference championship. And if you don't show up with your guys, you're going to get your head handed to you by anybody. Even in the preseason, the Bills didn't play their top 25 or 30 guys, so there's a little bit of that in there. But you could tell in Sean McDermott's post-game press conference, in talking to some of the players, yeah, that was a little embarrassing for him. And I don't know how much different it'll be this week in Tampa Bay on Saturday. But yeah, that was a little too much even for a preseason game, and I think they felt it.
Yeah, because again, it really, with all due respect to the Saturday game in Tampa, that might be more to see who's going to be guys 40 to 53 on the roster, right? More than a prism or an indication of what things are going to look like when it really starts in a big, huge way, in the first Sunday night of the season with the Ravens coming into Orchard Park. So that said, I mean, just nationally, Steve, the conversation I think last year was disrespectful, and the Bills responded by basically saying, yeah, we're just going to win the division again. And as a matter of fact, we're going to wrap it up with 5 weeks to go. And then we're going to have Josh Allen as an MVP and a true, Hall of Fame candidate down the line here. Now, I guess the respect is, sure, you can win this division. But outside of that, let's see it again. Roster-wise, who else is there? Is that a fair assessment of the Buffalo Bills, or are we disrespectful again here?
Well, everybody has doubts. I mean, every team in the league has some doubts about what they're going to do. I think the Bills, some of the doubts kind of reflect where they were last year. Nobody's really sure about their wide receiver room, and they did it last year with Mac Hollins and Marquez Valdez-Scantling on the roster and Khalil Shakir, who nobody knew about. And they picked up Amari Cooper mid-season, who now is still looking for a team. So the expectations were justifiably different last year. But in this year, they feel even better about that group that overachieved last year. Different guys overachieved last year, but they feel confident in their ability to do it even better this year. They scored more points in the NFL than anybody through the regular season and postseason last year, and it looks like they're going to be that good again. Josh seems at the height of his abilities. He just seems like there's nothing that gets around him, pre-snap, post-snap, and of course, he's the most difficult quarterback in the league to sack, so teams really have to take that into account when they're putting together a game plan. You can't even count on sacking the guy or getting pressure on him, because if you do, he's even better. He's a real problem. And with the guys they've got now and the philosophy they put in their wide receiver room and their skill set, particularly since they signed James Cook back, the Bills' offense is a real problem. A real problem, because they are not afraid to hand it off half the time. And their offensive line, they're good. I mean, they may not be an elite offensive line, but they're big, they're athletic, and they run the ball really well. So you couple that all together, and that offense is, I mean, they're going to be right there again. The question mark around this team has to center around the defense. They did nothing of note last year except one thing. They consistently churned out turnovers. They couldn't get teams off the field in third down. They couldn't stop the run. They couldn't rush the passer. It was all the best they could do is middle of the roads type numbers defensively. But they did get turnovers. That got them to the AFC Championship game. But defensively, if they can get any better significantly better in any part of their game, I think it'll achieve exponential results for the rest of the team, because all the offense needs is just, make the other team miss on a couple of drives, and you're going to win by a couple of possessions, because this offense is really difficult to stop. But defensively, I mean, you look at their draft, 5 of the first 6 picks were on that side of the ball. 3 of them were on the defensive front. And they got a really good corner in Max Hairston, who, when he gets back, he'll be plugged in pretty quickly, I would think. But if the defense is where the question marks are, and if that does get better, this team is going to be an even tougher out than they were a year ago when they got the conference championship.
And then with Allen, Steve Tasker, I mean, I think the only question left for him to answer is how long can he stay this great, right? I mean, he's reached the zenith of human being, right? Like he is the real deal. You can't say enough about him as a person, and you can't say enough about him as a talented quarterback who leads a city and a fan base that is so starving for him to bring a parade to town. That's the only question I have about is Allen, because he can't get any better, right? Like he's at the zenith of that, would think as well.
Yeah, you go to the analytics even point to it. I mean, even in crunch time and in playoff time, and when he plays, he's as good or better than anybody. Even Mahomes, his numbers are even better than Pat's when the chips are down. I mean, the guy just doesn't miss. He's impossible to get off the field. It takes a supreme effort by, Steve Spagnuolo seems to be able to do it at the right moment late in games, which is where it all comes down to. You're going to get into a spot with this team where you're going to be in a tussle. Even if you're playing your best, you're not going off and leaving them. Last year, in the last 65 games, they've lost 1 game by more than a possession. And that was week 3 last year to the Ravens, and they almost climbed back into that one after a couple of plays. So just after halftime, this is a team that is really difficult to beat. Even if you do manage to beat them, it's going to be a 1-possession game, and you're going to have Josh with the ball at some point late. They're tough. They're going to be right there again this year. They really will be. And it'll be a question of, and you always hear this stuff about this team is cursed and that team is cursed and that. If this team is cursed, it's not a curse of, always losing the Super Bowl or whatever. It's the curse of losing your last game. That's the curse. They are good enough to beat anybody on any given day, but you got to play well on that last day of that last game. And they have just not played well enough on those days. They're good enough to go to and win the Super Bowl and have been for 5 years, but you got to play well on the final day. And they haven't been able to do that just yet.
Well, I guess before I let you go, Steve, maybe another intangible is this is the last year in this stadium. And that could lead to the good tidings, the good karma, the football gods. I don't know. I mean, it's just going to come down to, is it going to be in Highmark? Is it not going to be in Highmark? Is it going to be against the Chiefs? Will it be against the Ravens? Could there be another team that pops into the mix here that the Bills need to get past on that day? I mean, maybe it'll be the old Rich Stadium that brings it through. I don't know, Steve.
Yeah. Well, the perfect case scenario is because I'll say this, like I said, if their defense plays well and raises the level, the 1 seed will be on the table for this team. They're going to be that good. I think their biggest challenge of this entire schedule is going to be opening night, Sunday night against Baltimore. I've been on Baltimore's side of the schedule where you get put out of the playoffs by a team when you've got a really good squad, and you go in and you get put out on the road and you get put out of the playoffs and you really feel like you had a chance to go the distance. Baltimore's going to come into Buffalo on Sunday Night Football opening weekend, and they're going to punch them in the mouth. If the Bills find a way to scrape out a victory in those circumstances, the sky's the limit for this crew. Now, I'm not saying the Bills will probably be favored, but I'm telling you what, I know John Harbaugh and I know those Ravens and what a good organization they are. That's going to be a tough team to beat on opening day. But that's the challenge. I think that's the game on this schedule. The Bills really have a favorable road after that. I still think the 1 seed's going to be on the table for them, if assuming their health.
Right.
So yeah, best case scenario, Rich, AFC Championship game for the final game in Highmark Stadium here in Buffalo before they move over to the new venue and off to a Super Bowl in Santa Clara, right? So we'll see.
And a parade. Don't forget that. That's the one.
Parade.
The one before.
And a victory cigar that's this big.
Yeah, in Jim Kelly's personal bar in his basement.
That is right.
Steve, thanks for the time. Let's do this throughout the season. Would love to chat as much as you're willing.
Call me anytime, Rich. Good seeing you.
Right back at you. That's Steve Tasker right here on The Rich Eisen Show. Catch The Rich Eisen Show live weekdays from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern on Roku Sports Channel in the U.S.